Hello, I'm Sharon Ross with the Capital City Arts Initiative, a visual arts nonprofit organization based here in Carson City. Since 2003, CCAI has been hosting a series of talks by artists, curators, scholars, journalists. We've named it Nevada Neighbors. Today we are delighted to host a discussion with artists Rachel Stiff and Stephen Reid about Rachel's exhibition entitled To the Sun. We have a great essay by writer and artist Danielle Kelly. Discusses the exhibition, and there are handouts here in the gallery, and it's archived on our website online. So Rachel and Stephen, welcome.
All right. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
How are you? So I know that you have been in different environments throughout your adult life, but most of it being in the desert. So when do you think you became cognitive of your landscape or your surroundings?
Yeah, that's really where the creating started. I'm from the middle of nowhere in Montana. The community I'm from is, there's 140 people, and I know almost all of them. Yes, it's true. And the majority, though, of occupants are cows. And so there's a lot of cattle ranches in Montana. Growing up in a really small town, and of course this is before internet, we didn't have much TV to keep ourselves occupied with, so it was going outside and creating forts, and then later riding horses. I learned to drive a truck, an old GMC stick shift that when I would shift, I would have to shove my body under the car, shift, and then pull myself back over to see where the heck I was going. So I had free range, full free range, really unsupervised, and I think the landscape was, it was just my world. I could go anywhere I wanted. There were no boundaries.
Right. Do you think the desert landscape is different than the kind of landscape that you grew up in Montana?
It is and it isn't. Eastern Montana is extremely arid, but I think the desert is the most intriguing to me because of its harsh complexities, and then also because of that, development is easier. There's less to clear away, but there is still that clearing away. When I lived in Vegas, I loved that the crust of Las Vegas is one big painting. So I think a lot about surface, how can I manipulate the surface, and for me that's what construction is. Anytime I'm passing by a construction site or a mine, I'm fascinated, because I think they're doing things that artists often do, placing materials in new locations and then repurposing them, and the desert just has a lot. It's on display, it's all for you to see. Whether you think that's beautiful or not is another question, but there's no hiding anything in the desert. You see it all.
Right, that's excellent. So I think that's a great segue to these drawings here of graphite. And I know that you employ the frottage method to kind of start these, but that's kind of unique the way that you do it. Can you maybe explain how you start that process?
Yeah, so this process is, again, it's not new. It was started in the Surrealist movement with Max Ernst, who would take a sheet of paper and graphite and do a rubbing of his floorboards in an apartment, and then draw strange things that would come from his subconscious in that rubbing. I do something similar, but I use a plaster or oil paint surface. I create a surface, something that I think is interesting or has a nice amount of flow, and then I pair those rubbings together and work back into the surface. So it's really intuitive. I don't know what it's going to look like in the end, and for me, that mystery is really crucial in creating anything. And you'll see that too in the paintings. I don't have a plan.
Right, yeah, so that, what's interesting to me as well is your process of how you're creating. So can you maybe explain your process? I know that most of the work that we're going to look at is abstraction, and maybe you can talk about how you collect information, because I don't think you work from any kind of reference material, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can't really explain that without first acknowledging my classical training. So I was trained as from observation. So you learn to look at how light informs objects, and then you need to take that information and record it on a page or through paint. So that kind of understanding how light forms an object is really important, but I don't want to be didactic. I don't want to teach anyone a lesson. I want to invite them into a new space. So my process is just to think about what landscape means for me and create an atmosphere. And I think, something I feel sometimes, and I'll be quite honest, frustrated with society is sometimes we don't our observation skills are not always on. And my art is a vehicle to consider your surroundings, and I create atmospheres.
Yeah, so I think that's a good place to start, is the term atmospheres.
Yeah.
Right? That's, because I drive through the landscape of Nevada
Yeah.
over 30,000 miles in the last 3 years, and I've seen a lot of atmosphere, I've seen a lot of landscape, and these resonate with me greatly.
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So maybe can you talk about these? The abstraction of the landscape is interesting to me, but there seems to be reference points within the paintings, maybe a horizon line that I can kind of latch onto, but they can be a little disorienting as a kind of a formal landscape.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk about that.
Okay. And I will start with this piece. It's called "What's Up with the Sky," and this painting really started in Los Angeles, and it was right after grad school. I was sort of grappling with what kind of painter I wanted to become, what was my subject matter, and I felt completely overwhelmed by the city. Being from rural Montana, I thought I would give it a go in the big city. But what I found myself doing is spending a lot of time in the car, which is what you do when you live in Los Angeles, and kind of like yearning to be somewhere else, possibly. But through all that, I would scan the horizon for some way out, even if it was just an imaginative, like if I could be anywhere, maybe I would be over there. And while I was doing that, I would also notice sort of almost this kind of apocalyptic events happening all across the city. A fire here, some kind of strange smoke emitting from this corner of the city. And then of course you get that gorgeous Los Angeles light that just kind of permeates everything. And I thought, maybe my content is actually just the space between me, the landscape, the sky, and everything in between. So that's a big task. And I think the only way for me to capture that is through what I call an atmosphere. So I'm creating sort of a record of all the things I'm noticing in a split second. And of course that takes time, so it's all there. The pollution, the beauty, the grittiness, and then the landscape. Where we are is a little disorienting. This is a made-up space, so I'm not telling anyone where they should be. I want them to enter into it. And just to help people out so they don't get too scared in this abyss, I oftentimes allow a horizontal line to kind of help ground you. Humans are so used to looking for the balance. Where are we? Where's the horizon line? Where am I going? So in order to do that, to kind of ease the tension, I allow a horizon line here and there. But it's not just one, it's little snippets. So you're not ever on stable ground.
Right. So is there, in the process of making these, is there a balance or a tug of war between conceptual and formal, right, as you're working through here, right? Because there seems to be a very steep kind of conceptual idea of what these are, but they're also very formal as well.
Yeah. Well, I try not to get inside of my own head too much. I think that you can overthink it, and with these paintings, they're not going to go anywhere if you don't just get kind of physical with it. But I am conscious. I am not trying to make an illusion of a space. So I have completely abandoned this idea of I need to show people where they are. Rather, I invite them into a space I'm creating. If it gets too locked into, oh, this is the mountain, this is the sky, I need to make that a little bit more rich. And that's when I get a big bucket of white and I completely knock the whole painting back. I don't want it to be a narrative, so I'm conscious of what is it I'm saying or asking.
So now we're looking at your pastels. I know there is some similarities between these and your drawings, but I don't think that you utilize the frottage process for these. Maybe you can talk about these a little bit and what these are doing for you, maybe that the drawings are not.
Yeah, these are really playful. It's an opportunity for me to take every day. So in the summer, I'm a teacher, so I get the summer off, but this is something I can do daily. I can finish them in one session. They're not high stakes. The canvases, which we'll look at later, are really, they're big, so it's a big undertaking. This is just paper and pigment, and I can let myself daydream a little bit. It's a way to process anything from anxieties to stress to just joy, and they're quite simply little poems, visual poems.
Right, so that's interesting. I think something I've been thinking about too is having also taught, right? You teach as well. Does that inform your work at all, or do you try to compartmentalize my teaching here and my artwork over here, or does it free flow back and forth?
It's a free flow back and forth, and of course I learn a lot from teaching. Students are my best teachers. I would not have discovered the frottage technique without trying to teach printmaking online, so that's a really difficult task. These are a way for me to just sort of put that aside and think about my own process and what I want out of the larger paintings. So for me, they're a way to get back in touch, make mistakes, and try to correct them.
So maybe we can check out some paintings over here. So here we are to your largest work in the show. And really, there's a lot of things that are going on here that are similar, but there's some interesting things that are completely different. And the thing that stands out for me right off the bat is your treatment of the canvas and how that becomes something different than just something of utility.
Yeah.
Become more of the form. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we were just speaking a little bit about mortality, and there's been, especially in the small art world that you become immersed in grad school, there's the sculpture people, there's the painting people, and sometimes we have a little bit of camaraderie and tension. So there's this idea that painting is dead, that we've done everything we can with painting, and that's tricky, and I don't necessarily agree. So I think we're always looking for ways to reinvent what painting is. Of course, I'm not trying to, and I've said this again, but I'll make it brief, I'm not trying to create anything realistic. I'm creating something that is my idea of nature. And in doing so, I have to talk about beauty, and for me, that is not the classic Thomas Kincaid kind of beauty. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and it's fleeting, and it also incorporates elements of decay. That's sort of a cliche word, but I think I have to use it. Part of the expanded fringe frame is just sort of harkening back to the history of painting, the Baroque, the heavy-handed Baroque ideal of beauty.
Right, so, and obviously gold is such a bold color, right?
Yeah.
So many references to gold, and it's never been one of my favorite colors, but it really works so well with these paintings. I mean, did you think about, or was the gold, did it have some kind of reference for you, or was it just a kind of formal choice when you're
A little bit of both. When I was really thinking about my place in painting, what kind of painter I wanted to become, I was thinking too about how does this surface, like can this surface, because I'm talking so much about the landscape and air and pollution and light and beauty and all these things all at once, how can that possibly turn over into something more of an object? How can that go out into the page? So, of course, in the beginning, these were just raw canvas, but the way they flowed was just so classical. And I think I sort of wanted to just touch on that history of painting again. That's hard to explain in just one interview, but when you look at the history of art, one of the strongest threads is painting. We started painting in caves, and then on pottery, and so it's a really strong thread to pull in the art history atmosphere.
Right.
I use that word too often.
Right. No, I mean, so titles are always interesting for me with abstraction. And when, obviously a lot of people will title pieces first and kind of go from that, or title their work afterwards. Can you maybe explain a little bit about maybe this title here, or for this? This is called Sweet Pea.
Yeah, it is called Sweet Pea, and so of course this also sort of goes back to the Dutch still lifes of that beautiful flower. Was not just a beautiful element of a painting, it also signified the fleeting quality of life, that it's in bloom and soon you know what will happen. So Sweet Pea is sort of this reference to my childhood, how quickly it seemed to have passed, and also this idea that I can always kind of find that in painting and being childlike and creating, but it also has to do with my relationship with my mother as well. She was a gardener, and she was always forcing us to look at the light on the trees, and of course as teenagers we thought, oh, this is so ridiculous, I have things to do. She would pull us out into the garden and say, oh, look at what's going on in the compost heap. And so now, of course, that's part of who I am, so it's here in my painting too.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. Your last piece, or the piece that you've completed, the most recent, correct?
Yeah.
So maybe what is, where does Rachel Stiff go from here, right? Do you continue this body of work, or are you looking at doing something else?
Yeah, I will always continue this body of work, because the beautiful thing is that it will always change on its own, but it's still stemming from the same main theme. So I think the atmospheres are here to stay. They're going to continue. They give me a really stable place to move out of and back to. So with the drawings, the graphite drawings, I'll continue those as well. Who knows how long? But what I think I've really found with these and the graphite drawings is this depth that I'm so fascinated with. And I find myself wanting to possibly take some of these forms off of the canvas and into the gallery. And doing that is, saying that and doing that are two different things. So we'll see how that manifests. I'm not sure where that's going to take me.
Right, that's fantastic, because there's a physicality, right, to where you can feel the paint almost wanting to move off the canvas into its own realm. And the fact that you create plaster casts for your footage, right, it's almost like it's bizarre that you would start with plaster cast, to do a rubbing for a 2D work,
Yeah.
and now maybe making your 2D work into something back into 3D, through something of that process would be really interesting.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I thank you.
Thank you.
For your time, and could you just talk about that dot for 1 minute, because it's bugging me and I don't know what it is.
It's dot. It's meant to make you pause and question everything.
Yeah. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you to Rachel and Stephen. That was a wonderful conversation. We want to thank Nevada Humanities, the National Endowment for Humanities, all CCAI's funders and members for providing support for this series and for the organization. Without all of you, this wouldn't happen. You can find additional online talks at CCAI's YouTube channel and links through our website, ccainv.org. Thank you.